What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Alright, so before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to, I believe this is a new subscriber. Shout out to Swarthy Wizard for the $15 donation via the Cash App. Much respect to him for showing love to Too Raw for TV. What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. A lot of people ask me, man, for a guy that's still relatively young at age 43, you seem older. Like, you seem like a person more in their, at least, late 50s and 60s. With the references and the people that you hold in high regard. You seem like you're part of a bygone era. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when I was born, my parents were a little bit older than most parents, not much older, but a little bit older. My mother was in her mid-30s, well, early 30s, I say. She was in her early 30s. The stereotype is that, most black mothers are in their teens and 20, but she's a little bit older, even though she had kids younger than that. My father was pushing 40. And in turn, their parents had them late. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, who passed away when I was just one, had my mother when he was in his late 40s. And my grandmother, who passed away at the age of 104 in 2008, she had my father, my paternal grandmother, had him when she was pushing 40. So I've always been introduced to older things, older customs, older figures, older television programs, in addition to some of the, matter of fact, to be honest with you, I was kind of a weird kid, man, because people would make, at first I didn't understand certain references, because I was being brought up, influenced by a lot of older stuff. So, when I was 8, 9 years old, I was watching reruns of the Flip Wilson Show. I was watching Laugh-In. I was watching The Honeymooners, and I even heard of Amos and Andy, even though it wasn't on television then. All in the Family. I knew who Red Fox, Sam Davis, all these older people. One of those persons I know of, I heard when I was a kid growing up, was Miles Davis. Now, I remember this vividly. There was a 2-week period in 1991 during the fall when we lost both Miles Davis and Red Fox. And I remember hearing at the time how great an influence Miles Davis was in music. Subsequent research and reading about the man doesn't do it justice as to how influential Miles Davis is when it comes to not just jazz, but music in general. He was a musical genius. He wasn't a perfect man. He was definitely flawed. But man, when it came to music, the man was in my opinion, a class by himself. All right? Miles Davis has been gone for over 30 years, but his influence is still felt, even today. Instrumental in the development of jazz, Miles Davis is considered one of the top musicians of his era. Born in Illinois in 1926, he traveled at age 18 to New York City to pursue music. Throughout his life, he was at the helm of a changing concept of jazz. Winner of 8 Grammy Awards, Davis died in 1991 from respiratory distress in Santa Monica, California. He was the son of a prosperous dental surgeon and a music teacher. He was born Miles Davis Dewey III on May 26, 1926, in Alton, Illinois. Davis grew up in a supportive middle-class household where he was introduced by his father to the trumpet at age 13. Davis quickly developed a talent for playing the trumpet under the private tutelage of Elwood Buchanan, a friend of his father who directed a music school. Buchanan emphasized playing the trumpet without vibrato, which was contrary to the common style used by trumpeters such as Louis Armstrong, and which would come to influence and help develop the Miles Davis style. Davis played professionally while in high school. When he was 17 years old, Davis was invited by Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker to join them on stage when the famed musicians realized they needed a trumpet player to replace a sick bandmate. Soon after, in 1944, Davis left Illinois for New York City, where he would soon enroll at the Juilliard School, known at the time as the Institute of Musical Art. While taking courses at Juilliard, Davis sought out Parker and, after Parker joined him, began to play at Harlem nightclubs. During the gigs, he met several musicians whom he would eventually play with and form the basis for bebop, a fast improvisational style of jazz instrumental that defined the modern jazz era. In 1945, Davis elected, with his father's permission, to drop out of Juilliard and become a full-time jazz musician. A member of the Charlie Parker Quintet at the time, this is when Davis wore that conch, I think, conch hairstyle. Davis made his first recording as a band leader in 1946 with the Miles Davis Sextet. Between 1945 and 1948, Davis and Parker recorded continuously. It was during this period that Davis worked on developing the improvisational style that defined his trumpet playing. In 1949, Davis formed a 9-piece band with uncommon additions, such as the French horn, trombone, and tuba. He released a series of singles that would later be considered a significant contribution to modern jazz. They were later released as part of the album Birth of the Cool. In the early 1950s, Davis became addicted to heroin. While he was still able to record, it was a difficult period for the musician, and his performances were haphazard. Davis overcame his addiction in 1954, around the same time that his performance of Round Midnight at the Newport Jazz Festival earned him a recording contract with Columbia Records. There, he also created a permanent band comprised of John Coltrane, Paul Chambers, and Red Garland. Davis recorded several albums with his sextet during the 1950s, including Porgy and Bess and Kinda Blue, his final album of the decade, released in 1959. Now considered one of the greatest jazz albums ever recorded, Kinda Blue is credited as the largest selling jazz album of all time, selling more than 2 million copies. Davis continued to be successful throughout the 1960s. His band transformed over time, largely due to new band members and changes in style. The various members of his band went on to become some of the most influential musicians of the jazz fusion era. These included Wayne Shorter and Joe Zawinul of Weather Report, Chick Corea, Return to Forever, and John McLaughlin and Billy Cobham, the Mahushanov Orchestra. The Mahuvishnu Orchestra. The development of jazz fusion was influenced by artists such as Jimi Hendrix and Sly and the Family Stone, reflecting the fusion of jazz and rock. The album, Bitches Brew, recorded a few weeks after the 1969 Woodstock Music Festival, set the stage for the jazz fusion movement to follow. Bitches Brew soon became a best-selling album. As a result, Davis was featured on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, becoming the first jazz artist to ever be so recognized. For his most traditional fans, this change of style was not welcome, but it exemplifies Davis's ability to experiment and push the limits of his own music style. Creativity, thy name was Miles Davis. In 1975, Davis was once again drawn into drug abuse, becoming addicted to alcohol and cocaine, and subsequently taking a 5-year hiatus from his career. In 1979, he met actress Cicely Tyson, who helped him overcome his cocaine addiction. He and Tyson married in 1981. From 1979 to 81, Davis worked on recordings that culminated in the release of the album The Man with the Horn, which registered steady sales but wasn't well received by critics. Davis spent the 1980s continuing to experiment with different styles. He interpreted songs made popular by Michael Jackson, such as Human Nature, and Cyndi Lauper, Time After Time, on his album You're Under Arrest, released in 1985. It was around this time that Davis developed a feud with fellow trumpeter Wynton Marsalis. Marsalis publicly criticizes Davis's work in jazz fusion, claiming that it wasn't, quote, true jazz. Subsequently, when Marsalis attempted to join Davis on stage without invitation at the Vancouver International Jazz Festival in 1986, Davis requested that he leave the stage using strong language. To this day, the quarrel between the musicians has been credited with making the International Jazz Festival famous. Davis reinvented himself yet again in 1986 with the release of Tutu. Incorporated synthesizers, drum loops, and samples. The album was well received and garnered Davis another Grammy Award. This was followed by the release of Aura, an album that Davis had created in 1985 as a tribute to Miles Davis's Aura, but wasn't released until 1989. Davis won yet another Grammy for this project. It was also around this time that Miles Davis began to have serious health issues. I think it was in 1989 he was hospitalized for a time, and there were always these rumors, even about that time, that he was suffering from HIV/AIDS. I'll get into that a little bit later on, shortly. Honoring his body of work in 1990, Davis received a Lifetime Achievement Grammy Award. In 1991, he played with Quincy Jones at the Montreux Jazz Festival. The two performed a retrospective of Davis's early work, some of which he had not played in public for more than 20 years. Later that same year, Miles Davis was hospitalized and then subsequently succumbed to pneumonia and respiratory failure, dying at the age of 65 on September 28th, 1991. There have been persistent rumors that Davis was taking AZT at the time and that he suffered from HIV or perhaps even full-blown AIDS in addition to his other ailments. But these rumors have never been conclusively proven, so we don't know for certain whether he had HIV or not. Miles Davis was posthumously rewarded his final Grammy in 1993. This honor was just another testament to the musician's profound and lasting influence on jazz. And even to this day, Miles Davis's music is sampled by artists who don't even know who he is. They just know it's music that's been sampled by other artists that they're sampling from. Don't realize the originator was Miles Davis. Like I said before, he was very creative, innovative, and a major force in the jazz world, the likes of which we've never seen before, and probably will never see again. So what you guys think?